Hi, I'm Ella Gibson. I'm world #1. I'm Merlin ambassador, and I am a Darton pro shooter. The bow of choice for me is the Darton Exodus, which we have here and here on the table. There's also the Darton Departure, but personally I choose to shoot the Exodus as I like to shoot a shoot-through riser, which basically means we have the double piece of metal rather than just a single, which is here. Both actually weigh exactly the same, so that doesn't even come into any decision that you want to make. The ATAs of both bows are identical, the string lengths are identical, and the cams are identical. So you really can choose which one you want just based on the feel, the geometry, and how it kind of sits in your hand, which is a really nice feature of the Darton bows. Most places and companies only have one choice for the main line rather than two. So this has two choices and you can pick what you want without really having to compromise on anything. One of my favorite features personally of the Darton bows is actually the stops. So if you see here,
what's my desk?
If you see here on the cams, there's quite a big flat stop. See, this one right now actually doesn't have the stops put on properly, so this is kind of how it comes from the factory. But this diameter is quite large, so you have more contact against the cable, which gives you a much harder stop at full draw. If you're someone like me who pulls pretty hard into the stop, quite aggressively, then a hard stop is really important. That way you can keep a nice consistent reference, you don't change your draw length, you get more consistency for your own shot. It's not a super heavy riser, and it means you can load the bow up on the weights exactly how you want. You can put as much on your rods or as little on your rods without having to compromise and feeling like you're holding out this big hunk of metal. Another nice feature on the Darton, especially if you've come from a Hoyt and an SVX cam, where you always have the yoke at the top, is the Darton also has a yoke, but it has a double yoke, so top and the bottom. So you get to lean the cam on both the top cam and the bottom cam, and it just gives you an extra element that you can play with for your own little tune, just to get those extra couple points that you might want out of it. This is my bow, my Darton Exodus, my little baby at the moment. I've been doing quite a lot of work on it. I'm pretty happy with how it is at the moment. Last week I changed my draw length a little bit. Well, I say a little bit, a country mile for me, which I can actually do on the cams because they do 1/4 inch adjustments, which is so much nicer from a standard bow where it's 1/2 inch and it's so much, and then you're messing so much with cables, trying to get like it back down and go in the middle, and it's such a faff. So 1/4 inch adjustment is definitely a must. Quite a few modern bows now have it, but still not every bow, so that's quite important to me. Then another kind of big edit I've made myself is my stops here. So these ones are actually aftermarket ones. A friend of mine did them. They're made of aluminium. They're exactly the same profile as the Darton stops, but I've made it in between two different sizes. So the Darton has the small ones, the medium ones, and the big ones. This is my own medium one, which I really like and do recommend if each of the other ones aren't quite the holding weight you want, but it really depends where you're at in the cam, in the rotation, in your own holding weight and poundage. I like 60 pounds and about 18 and a half pound holding weight. That's kind of where I'm happy. I don't really want more than 19 and I don't want less than 17. So this kind of puts me right in the middle while still being able to shoot 60 pounds. So those are some of the things I've kind of done to make it my own. The other thing I've actually found made a really big impact on the bow and how it groups is the string stop. So most people say to remove it and get rid of it. That's like standard practice of just, you have a bow with a string stop, first thing you do, take it off. And I did that, and actually my grouping just wasn't as good with it on. So I found a bit of testing in terms of where I want this position to be, and I like it against the string, but not super against the string. And that really makes a big impact to my grouping. So if you get one, I definitely recommend playing with the string stop and seeing what you like and seeing where it is. Plus it gives the bow such a nice feel. Having the string stop, there's way less vibration in the bow. It just feels nicer, it feels so much more crisp. Normal tuning, like I've done torque tune, so that's why my rest is pretty far back. This is the AE Freak Show QD. The torque tune, if you haven't seen it before, I have a story highlight on my Instagram, so you can see that and check out for a guide. But basically, you turn the bow right, shoot it, see where your arrow lands, turn the bow left, shoot it, see where your arrow lands, and do one normal. And then depending how it lands compared to your normal one, you adjust the distance between your sight and your rest. So if when you turn it right, it goes right, and you turn it left, it goes left, then you want to increase that distance. So either move your rest further back or move your sight further out. If it goes the opposite way, so you turn right, it goes left, etc., then you decrease that distance. So either move your rest further in or move your sight further in, and you go that way. Pretty basic, pretty easy, but it actually makes a really big difference. So for me, like one hole further in can be when I talk left, I could hit a 6 versus an X. Like the impact can be massive, and it really makes a difference when you're shooting in the wind, especially when it's windy and you're there holding ages and you're trying to brace against the wind. No one's dead perfect, no one's dead accurate. It's very easy just to turn the bow a little bit more or less than you want to. So doing that talk tune, it makes a big impact. That one is really important for me. So of course, I paper tear. That's kind of standard. When you get a new bow, you set everything how you want it, do a paper tear, and kind of go from there. But paper tear is never my most important thing because I naturally talk the bow really far right. So I can never really get a good paper tear, and I've kind of had to deal with just living with a nasty tear. And the comedy of that when everyone's like, oh, it's the most important thing. And then I can send them a photo and be like, well, I just shot a world record and my paper tear is this big. So is it that important? And people realize not quite the end of the world. One thing I do think is worth for any bow though, for Darton and anyone else, is actually choosing your D-loop position on the string. So where it goes, whether it's high up in the bow or down low, massively changes how a bow aims. So when I start with the bow, I'll put on a D-loop without a knocking point. I'll measure the full ATA, so from the top to the bottom, find the middle point of the bow, mark it, and do some marks above and below and see where it sits in the bow. For this bow, the middle point is pretty much where the burger buttonhole is, so that's pretty easy to go off of. And then I will move the D-loop up and down about like 1/8 of an inch at a time and shoot some arrows and see how it aims and see what that characteristic is like. For me, on the Dartons, they aim much better higher up. I've spoken to some other people shooting them and they found the same thing, but of course that could be individual. You might find something completely different, but it's for sure worth doing. Similarly, if you have trouble with the aim, you can look at tiller. So the tiller is basically how far away the limb is to the string at the bottom and at the top. So that kind of limb pocket gap. So if you look really closely, you can see this little hole down here, the gap between the limb and my riser, so my poundage. Down here is really tiny. But if you look up here, it's just a little bit bigger. Not massive, but a little bit bigger. So my tiller is slightly offset. So I have my top bolt wound out 1/2 turn more than my bottom one. And it kind of changes the feel of the bow in your hand. Because I was used to a Hoyt and a different grip angle, and I got comfortable shooting that because I'd shot all my life. Of course, it takes some time to get used to this. So changing that tiller just gave me more of the grip angle I wanted and the feel I wanted to be able to aim the best I could. But I do think the most important thing for setting up a bow is the setup rather than the tuning. So that's getting it to aim well, it's getting it to feel good, it's getting it to be comfortable. I always say, like, if I can aim the arrow in the 10, it doesn't really need to be tuned. It should go in the 10. The tuning is that when I'm aiming at the 10 and I make a horrible shot, that it still lands in the 10. Or when I'm aiming it in the middle and I just kind of move out of the middle at the last second, it still lands in the middle. That's the tuning. The tuning gives you the forgiveness, not the setup. So spending more time on the setup is, in my opinion, vastly more important than just the tuning. I'm Ella Gibson, world #1. Come try Darton out at Merlin stores today.